Welcome to another wonderful day in Tasmania. And when I say wonderful, I mean changeable. This light is going from bright, high contrast to dead flat and everywhere in between. And I'm heading behind that cliff face over there to demonstrate just how we can do the best that we can with those changeable conditions and how we can actually make it work to our advantage. Let's go. Light conditions can make or break a photograph. You know, it's not all sunsets and early foggy mornings. Sometimes we just get what we get. We're stuck with the day that we have and the conditions that come along with that day. Right now there's enough light to get a decent photograph, but it's very flat. It's incredibly overcast and the clouds don't look like much, so we can't incorporate those. There are actions that we can take that maybe might give us something worth hanging on a wall. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a massive vista like I was hoping for here. A few years ago I took a picture from this very spot of the cliff face up behind. You can just make out a climber halfway up. It was late at night, the moon was shining full on the cliff face, and I really wanted to recreate that during the daytime. But the conditions aren't quite there yet, and a little bit earlier we had bright sunshine giving the columns over there clear definition, and now it's quite flat. I'm going to set up the camera, exactly the same setup as I had before, same camera, same lens, just the daytime. Wow, it is so much higher than you think. But when you stand back and look at it, sure, it fills the view, but until you point the camera up, and that's probably about 60 degrees on a wide angle lens, that's when you realise just how high this thing is. These columns range from, I think, 60 to 110 metres. Anyway, we are here to photograph, and I want to reproduce that nighttime shot that I did a few years back. I lined up the camera as best as I could to get the same angle of view, but I did move a little bit slightly because when I came through at night, I couldn't actually see the trees that are in front of me here, which you can see on the side of the view here. I have the ability now, when I can see the trees, to just move that composition slightly so that I don't have to worry about them so much. So I've got the composition as best as I can, but the light just isn't playing nicely. I want to show you what I do to combat that and to make it a much more special photograph. Looking at the histogram, you can see there's a little red spike there, and if we pull the light back as much as we can, that light doesn't come in below the reaches of the histogram until everything else is very, very dark. But I do want that to be below because I need some texture to the clouds as well. And I don't want that blown out because it will detract from everything else. That sun is just up here and it's blowing out. I wonder if I should move the camera down. I don't need all of that sky like I did in my nighttime shot. Okay, I'm just going to take that shot now. That way the sky is out of the way. I don't have to worry about it again. Now it's time to concentrate on the mountain itself. It is tempting to push everything to the right. I'm not a strong believer in shooting to the right because you lose a lot of detail. If I push that histogram to the right now, what that does is put a halo all around the edges, and that's very hard to combat when you're back home on the computer. So I don't mind having all of this in the dark area because the histogram isn't crunching the blacks. So it's in the bottom sort of third to a quarter, and that's fine because that's manageable. And one of the advantages of shooting in RAW is that you can push that histogram past its limits, because the histogram is based on the JPEG preview, not on the RAW data. So if you feel like you need to get just that little bit more out, you can push it up by anywhere between a half to a full stop, depending on your camera. That was challenging, but the challenge did not end with the shoot. Now, I'm not going to do a full edit here, but I just wanted to show you my process. I use Capture One for my photo editing, but you should be able to do the same thing in your software package. Let's get to it. I've got the raw image here, and my first step that I always do is to work on the physical aspects. That means white balance and any lens corrections that I need to make. I like to set my white balance anywhere between 5,000 and 5,500. I find that's a really good range. 5,000 is typically where the light sits in Tasmania. And following that, you need to look at your actual lens. I've chosen a Tamron 15 to 30 millimeter lens. Now, you might be saying you've got a Pentax lens, but the Pentax lens is just a rebranded Tamron. And then following those lens corrections, you can adjust your chromatic aberration if there's any present, and any keystoning that you want to do. This image particularly has some pretty severe keystoning. No amount of keystoning adjustment is going to make that vertical. The second step I take is healing and cloning. And you'll see up the top here, I've got this little branch poking in over the top, and there's another one up in the top right hand corner, and I just heal those out because they're just too big a distraction. The next step is all about the light, so it's exposure and HDR settings. Typically these settings just bring in your dynamic range so that you've pulled back any overexposure and you've pushed up any underexposure, and that gives you a much better range of light to make your finer adjustments with. Levels and curves. I use the curves as a finer adjustment for contrast. Just pushing up the contrast only deals in that mid-range tone, whereas you have a look at my curves down the bottom left, I've actually got my contrast point about a third of the way down. And the reason I do that is if you watch the line on the curves as I move across the image, you'll see that that line is based around that point at 1/3. So adjusting the curve above and below that point increases that contrast. Now you don't want to overdo it either, but you need just enough to give some definition to the image. Step 5 is colour. When I activate the colour layer, you'll see that the oranges have a little bit more pop and the green is brightened a bit more. So it's just lifted just that little bit. I'm not trying to overdo it, I just want to accentuate those colours. The 6th step is just some basic sharpness and clarity. I haven't added any sharpening to this image, but I have added some clarity. It's just to add that little bit of definition in a flat image. Now that I've finished my basic adjustments, I'll just check the before and after. And you can see on the left-hand side just how flat that image was, and how just with some small adjustments, you can really pull out the details and lift some colours and give that a lot more life. And that's it. I use the same process in the next image that's coming right now. It's raining. The sun's come out. Don't expect that to hold when I get to my next location. But it does make for an interesting day, that's for sure. a lot closer to the cliff face now, and I am around the corner, but I am, I'd say 10 metres away from the cliff face, which makes the view from here startling. It's quite incredible and awe-inspiring to stand under. But of course my goal isn't just to sit here and gape at it. There is no way on earth I'm going to get the entire cliff face in, but I'll do my best. I've got my 15mm. I could do with 13, I reckon. And it's just going to be handheld because the size of my tripod, and I'm on this small rock and there's trees all around, and I need to get down as low as I can. At 15mm, there's no way I'm doing a panorama because that curvature from the lens is incredible. One other thing with this scene, it is very, very wide, and I want to get as much in as possible, so I don't want to go too far above the cliff face here. I want to get as much in as I can, and you would have noticed when I did that panning shot that the top of the buttress leans right down, and I want a level top, so I am actually going to angle that camera around so that it's not horizontal. I think it's about 30 metres, 100 feet if you're into that. And there is quite a difference in focal range, so I need to get as much of that in focus as I can. The wide angle certainly helps, but even still, I think f16 should allow me to get most of that in focus in the one shot. It's also a great opportunity to get some really nice scenic shots from up here. Strangely enough, every time I take a picture, the light is flat as. Like, there is nothing to give definition.